Today we are dealing with an Indian writer, and his name is Munshi Premchand. Well versed in Hindi and Urdu language, he has written a host of works that have dealt with social issues. He is a very special person indeed, born in the pre-independence era, born in the year 1880, and he passed away in the year 1936. In fact, he was born in the most tumultuous times of Indian history, a time when there was a regeneration and a rebirth of ideas, of ways of thinking, and there was a range of people also who had come onto the scene at that time. So I feel that perhaps, given the fresh burst of energy on all fronts, whether it was political, literary, spiritual, cultural, this fresh burst of activity really reflected in the varied ideas that came out in the works of Munshi Premchand. He was born as Dhanpat Rai, and he later on changed his name to Premchand. This was his pen name, and Munshi was the honorary title given to him by the people who loved him for the works he had written. I'd like to give you a quote of his. He said, "Like timidity, courage too is contagious." Yes, he roared like a lion on the literary firmament. Munshi Premchand had a very eventful life. He faced a lot of challenges in his life and came out successfully. Life was not a bed of roses for him. He faced difficult choices and he took the right decisions. And that's what made Munshi Premchand. Munshi Premchand had a powerful pen, and every work that he wrote created waves, I suppose, because his first work, titled Sozi Watan, made the British Raj so uncomfortable that they banned his work. He had actually started his career with the name Nawab Rai, but he changed it to Premchand when he had this difficult time with the British Raj, who did not like his nationalistic ideas. Remember, it was early 20th century, not even the peak of the nationalistic movement, and even a small word or an expression of independence was quickly crushed down. So he changes his name from Nawab Rai to Premchand. Yes, that was 3 names to go: Dhanpat Rai, Nawab Rai, and then Premchand. Add to it Munshi, and that of course was a title given to him by the people. 1906 was a difficult time in his personal life. He was separated from his wife on personal grounds, and he went on to marry a child widow. A very revolutionary step at that time, but one that he took with confidence and with complete belief in what he was doing. 1919, he obtained a BA degree. In 1921, he was promoted as Deputy Inspector of Schools. 5 months into his career, and at Gorakhpur, he listens to Mahatma Gandhi. And lo and behold, what should happen to him? He is taken over by this feeling of national fervor and feels that he should resign his government job. Not that things were very easy for him, not that he had a comfortable life, therefore he could give up a job. In fact, at that point of time, he was a sick man. He had a wife and 2 children to support. But he took 5 days, consulted with his wife. It was a joint decision, and he gave up his government job. So you can clearly see that he made strong and hard decisions in life. His writings feature realism, and they catch all the problems that were of his times: corruption, child widowhood, prostitution, feudal system, poverty, colonialism. There's not one topic that was left by his fertile, sensitive, thinking mind. Premchand strictly believed in his policy, or in his idea of social realism that should be seen through his writing. He was not of the romantic school. Yes, at that time, Tagore was well known all over the world. His works were translated. But the same coverage Munshi Premchand's works did not enjoy. There are various reasons for it, but Munshi Premchand chose his own path, and he decided that his path would be the path of social activism, realism, but of course with a human touch. He always spoke about individuals. He didn't look at the masses. He looked at individuals in a certain situation. So whatever the situation was, poverty, corruption, child widowhood, the caste system, any issue of the social system touched his heart, and he reached out with his pen to pen really powerful lines that shook the conscience, the mind, and the imagination of the people of his times. The story we are dealing with today is The House of God. This is mainly having two characters. One is Sukhiya, the widow, and her son Jaiwan. It's a very, very sad story. It has a deep sense of pathos and sadness to it. But we can't help looking and the plight of people at that time. It also wakes up our conscience. It makes us to start thinking. Well, there was this widow Sukhiya living in a village, a very small, tight-knit community with a strongly based caste system, a very rigid system that governed, that ruled behavior, that ruled the way of life, that ruled the work they did. People were happy going by their rules maybe, or unhappy even if they were. There was no protest. Sukhiya was in no way different from the others in the village. She was happy with her son Jaiwan. And when the little boy would say, "Mother, when I grow up, I'll buy you a lot of red saris," Sukhiya would really felt so happy with this promise of the boy. She saw in it the innocence of the boy. She was touched by his concern and care for her. Anyway, Sukhiya was happy with this little boy, although she lost her husband and 2 other children. Now it so happened that Jaiwan fell sick. It was a fever that wasn't leaving him. And each day Sukhiya would be nursing the little boy and hoping that his fever would leave him very soon. It was not happening. And she was getting more and more depressed. That night, she had a dream, and she saw her lost husband in the dream telling her, "Sukhiya, go to the village temple and worship Thakurji, because Thakurji is bound to heal the child." Sukhiya's heart was filled with new hope, new faith. And the next day she sets out to the village temple. She wants to go and worship Thakurji. She goes there, she sets her foot into the premises of the temple. And what should happen? She stopped at once and people ask her, "Why are you here?" She says, "I'm here to worship the deity." And they say, "It is not allowed." She says, "Please let me just fall at his feet. That's all I ask of you." They say, "We cannot allow a low caste woman to come into the temple. It is not allowed." She's literally thrown out of the temple. She was arguing for her sick child. But they said, one person and the whole village will be cursed. The whole village will have to face the anger of the village god. Sukya had to retreat. She went back home. Her little Jaiwan was so much better. She gave him a little rice to eat, some jaggery. That's what she had at home. But towards night, the fever started to increase. Sukya was desperate. What did she do? She came out of her house. It was dark. Everyone spoke of witches who were haunting the place. But Sukya did not care. She walked through the dark streets. She went up to the village temple and she took a stone that she found lying there and hammered the lock. The door broke open. The noise woke up the priest. He came and raised a big noise there, called everyone and said, "See what's happening. A woman is entering the deity's presence." And all the villagers came up in the night, in the dark of the night, and they raised up their hands against her. They hustled her and pushed her around. And in the pushing and pulling, the poor little child that she was carrying in her arms fell down. And instantly life left the child. A hushed silence took over the crowd. Not a person spoke. They were shocked. And Sukya said, "Why are you silent now? What happened?" She fell over her dead child, gave a shriek, and she lost her life too. The grief-stricken, the heart-broken mother died for her child. The double shock was too much for the crowd. It was a fight between the two. It was a fight over the village god, but they did not expect it to end in death. This was a double shock that struck the villagers, and all that they could do was stand in stunned silence. That's where the story ends. A very abrupt ending. But a lot of questions have been raised by this lone, bold woman's action. Can we call her an activist? I'd like to repeat the quote that Premchand was said to have said. Now, this quote that I had given initially at the beginning of the lesson, I'd like to repeat. He said, "Like timidity, courage also is contagious." Okay, what exactly happened in the story? Things all happened in such a rush at a time when it was dark, in the dead of night, voices raised, people making a hue and cry, and in a rush of action, ending in a shocked silence, the whole story has come to an end. But this action has raised a lot of questions. What are the questions that this action raises? Sukya herself asked, "Why is your God locked up? Does society dictate religion? Is religion a set of rules and regulations we have to follow, or is it a matter of personal faith?" These are questions that people began to ask themselves. Now, when we begin to ask ourselves questions, it's a good habit, it's a good thing. It means we are alive and we are aware. Yes, it's a good thing to ask questions, to think and to be aware, but it also should lead into action. Let me tell you a little episode that happened in the 1960s. Now, there was another oppressed lot of people on the other side of the globe. They were the Black Americans, and they had their freedom. They were supposedly free, but they faced a lot of discrimination from the whites in American society. Now, in the 1960s, there was a woman called Rosa Parks who was returning home quite late in the evening. And on her way home, she found a seat in the bus and she rested her tired feet. Probably her back was also aching, her legs were aching, so she sat down comfortably, waiting to get back home. Hardly a few minutes into the ride, when a white gentleman got onto the bus. The conductor demanded she give up her seat. Rosa Parks said, "No, I cannot do that because I am tired, I have bought my ticket, I am entitled to a seat." Thus started the whole Black civil rights movement that became a part of American history. And of course, it ended into the whole of Black society being aware, being led into action, and understanding that they have equal rights and they are just as equal as the whites and the rest of mankind. That was Rosa Parks. Now, where does Sukya fit into this picture? Sukya was just one woman. She raised her voice. There was no support, but Sukya was the voice that was crying out for help and the voice that was heard, the voice that Munshi Premchand captured in the house of God. What exactly is activism all about? Activism, as defined by Munshi Premchand, is courage leading to change. The courage of Sukya, the change of heart that she had, she felt she had to take an action, and she boldly took the step that she personally felt had to be done. So, it is hats off to Sukya. All admiration for that lone brave woman. The love of her child led her, drove her, initiated the first action that tore apart a rigid, caste-ridden society. Did you know Munshi Premchand had an association with Bollywood? Yes, he did. He tried his hand at script writing. He was a tremendous success. But his first film also had such rave reviews. It was all about trade unionism, that the corporate sector, business people wanted his movies to be stopped even before it was released. And the strange fact is, even press workers of his own Saraswati press that was running on losses came out in a big way to protest against what they felt were inhuman conditions of work. They felt that they were not being paid enough. Well, the fact was, Munshi Premchand worked at a loss, and this was not really understood or appreciated by the workers, but his pen, I attributed to his pen, was so powerful that it immediately ended up in a strike by his very own workers. Well, that's the humorous side to it, but Munshi Premchand took this very seriously, and he felt perhaps hurt, maybe he felt taken aback, but for whatever reason, he decided the commercial field of Bollywood was not suitable for him. He was rather a social activist with the pen. So he goes back to writing and writing books alone. Maybe Bollywood was not yet ready for a person with his foresight and with his kind of vision. It was in the year 1977 that Satyajit Ray, the ace filmmaker who is recognized the world over, took up Premchand's story titled Shatranj Ke Khiladi. This was an amazing story where he shows how Indian rulers just gave up their territory, sitting and playing a game of chess while the British took over the entire kingdom. And this was pointing out to the apathy and maybe to the lack of governance that the Indian rulers were showing at that point of time. So the British Raj just took advantage of this situation and walked into the kingdom. I'd like to quote a review from the website satyajitray.org, and this is how the review reads. The film has no heroes or villains. Like in most of his films, he sympathizes with the better attributes of both the British and the king, Wajid Ali Shah. General Outram is troubled by the illegal means he must follow to take over Awadh, despite a treaty of friendship with the kingdom. But he feels duty-bound to the British Empire. The king Wajid Ali Shah is shown as an accomplished poet, musician, choreographer with no interest whatever in political matters. He has completely relied on the friendship of the British to maintain his army, and he has been let down badly by them. Who do we feel sorry for? The king Wajid Ali Shah, who is voluntarily, literally handed over his kingdom to the British, but who also was so trusting. Or do we look at General Outram, who had those pangs of conscience, who felt bad? He did betray Wajid Ali Shah, but he also had a moment when he felt bad about breaking that friendship treaty, about acting deceitfully. So you can see that Munshi Premchand always looked at both sides of the story. He looked at the British side, he looked at the Indian side. He looked at the side of Sukiya, and he also looked at the villagers who never meant that they should murder or they should kill a widow and her child. They only wanted to maintain the system. They didn't want to kill anyone in the process, but they just did not understand Sukiya and her need for comfort, her faith in her God, and her need to save her child. When you finally look at Munshi Premchand, what really strikes us? His realism, his activism apart, his concern for the individual, the way he paints the character in all its shades. For him, no character is just black or white. There are shades of gray in every character that he portrays. Perhaps that is what makes his stories so very powerful.